Hello and welcome to the Wake Up Call podcast. I'll get to today's episode in a moment, but I want to go over the schedule of episodes for next week beforehand. Monday's episode will be a conversation with Mr. Scott Horton on Iraq, Syria, and ISIS. On Tuesday, we'll be airing a discussion with Stephen Kinzer, the author of Overthrow, about U.S.-led regime changes. On Wednesday, our episode will be a conversation I had with Dr. Doug McGuff about surviving the American healthcare system and being able to navigate that successfully. On Thursday, our episode will be a conversation with Mr. Daniel McAdams about the recent announcement of U.S. troops being sent near Russia's border. And our Friday episode will be with Dr. Walter Block on fractional reserve banking and the significance of that. So now on to today's episode. This is a very short episode. After our conversation with Mr. Andy Duncan on October 5th, 2014, where we discussed British politics and Scottish secession, with his background in financial derivatives, we thought it was a good idea to quickly ask him about his feelings on the state of the market. So that's today's episode. Even though this was recorded in October of 2014, there's still a lot of value in what he had to say. So that's our episode for today. Daniel and I speaking with Mr. Andy Duncan about the real state of the market. Mr. Duncan is an England-based financial derivatives lecturer who teaches mainly in New York, London, Dubai, and Singapore. He is the author of the novel Sword of Marathon under the pen name Jack England and has a series of financial lectures on the Mithril, that's MITHRIL, Money YouTube channel. You can follow his work at Mithril Money, that's MITHRILmoney.com, and at andyjamesduncan.wordpress.com. For more information, please see the show notes page for this episode at wakeupcallpodcast.com/real-market.
When I heard that you did a lot with securities and derivatives, I was very interested. What's your opinion right now on the market and what's going on right now?
Well, I think it's strange. Pre-2007, we used to laugh at the Japanese. We saw the Japanese zombie banks collapse in the 80s and 90s, and we saw 2 lost decades in Japan, and we laughed at the Japanese. We said they're mad people. All this Keynesian money printing. I mean, the sign of madness is if something doesn't work, you keep doing it. And they kept having problems. They kept printing money. They kept propping up these zombie banks. They didn't get anywhere. And we laughed at them. And we've absolutely copied them. We've done exactly the same. We've got all these zombie banks. We've got big zombie banks in the United States. We've got big zombie banks in the UK. They should have all been let go. All these horror stories and scare stories that they propagated to save themselves were very effective at getting them saved by governments. You've got to remember, of course, governments need the banks because the banks supply them with the financing they need. Because when, say in the UK, the British government spends £700 billion a year, it only raises £500 billion in taxation and borrows the other £200 billion. Who sells those government bonds? Well, the banks do. And then eventually the Bank of England in the background monetizes those bonds. It slowly soaks up and buys this £200 billion worth of bonds by slowly printing more money and buying them, which creates the market in government financing. So what that does is that gives the politicians the necessary means to, even in an economic crisis, to fund itself. So they need the banks. That's why they prop them up. They're like 2 drunken men leaning on each other, walking home at night. So where are we now? We are in zombie land. We are crawling along. There will be no recovery. We'll endlessly see these green shoots. That's just volatility going up and down. The central banks will just print more and more and more money. Now there'll come a point where it looks like hyperinflation is about to take off. Because they can't get away with this forever. You can't keep propping stuff up. You can't keep supporting failed businesses indefinitely. You're gonna stand on the edge of hyperinflation. At that point, they'll have a choice. Go down the road of hyperinflation. That will necessitate military dictatorships to keep the population under control. That will be terrible, but eventually it will fail. Or it will necessitate hyperinflation without a military dictatorship. That will very, very quickly fail, and people will stop using fiat government money, and they'll turn to real stuff. They'll turn to, bedpans. They'll turn to gold, silver, cocos, coconuts. I don't know what they'll turn to. Or they'll say, okay, we like our positions of privilege. We like having big incomes that we don't deserve. We like swanning around the world in jets that are paid for by taxpayers and by money printing. We want to keep that power, that privilege for ourselves and our friends. So we'll have to stop printing money. When that happens, if that happens, there will be an enormous monetary collapse. I mean, Ron Paul, who I greatly admire, just read the books of Ron Paul and the thoughts of Ron Paul. He'll tell you what's going to happen. Basically, people have been putting off. If you take a little bit of heroin, things are looking a bit bad. You stop taking heroin, you'll have a few weeks of feeling a bit morose and a bit uncomfortable, but you'll get over it. But if you take heroin for 30 years and every time you feel a bit sad, you up the dose, well, if you don't kill yourself and then you come off, you're going to have an enormous hangover. You're going to have a terrible cold turkey. We will have the recession to end all recessions. We will have 3 or 4 years of unbelievable financial recessionary horror. Massive collapse because if the government stops printing money, let's say let's just take England as a case. The Bank of England stops printing, say, 10 million and then buying a private bank's 10 million of government bonds. The government bond market will then collapse. What that will mean is all British government, all the pensions in England, which are forced to buy British government bonds, the value of those pensions will collapse. There will then be people with pitchforks marching on Downing Street and Whitehall, demanding an end to this nonsense. Companies will be going out of business hand over fist as the banks fail. Every time they lose £10, they have to foreclose on £100 worth of loans because of fractional reserve banking. So they will shut down viable businesses because they'll just have to suck the money in. The money supply will collapse completely. I mean, it wouldn't happen with gold, of course. You can't destroy a gold coin short of a nuclear explosion, nuclear fusion or fission or whatever. But fractional paper money can collapse. So there'll be a massive collapse in money. There'll be a massive collapse in the economy. There'll be a hyper depression, and that will last several years. I can't predict how that will come out. I have 2 alternative scenarios there. One, a military dictatorship. Just so these parasites in power can keep in power. So we'll have something that looks a lot like the Soviet Union. Or we'll have a new free market order based upon sound money. That's a much, much smaller chance, but it is a possibility. So where are we now? We're in the age of unknowingness. We're in the age of zombie land. We are watching stocks going up and up and up. That's because more and more money is being printed, and it's trying to chase real things, and companies are very, real things. They're more real than bonds are. So there will be a collapse in the bond market. Stock prices, I don't know what's going to happen because there's so much money floating around chasing those stocks. They could collapse in value. They could stay static, but I think they'll do a lot better than bonds. Banks will collapse. There'll be a huge deflation. There'll be a hyper depression. So you want to be in real things there, and you want to be in, farmland, and you want to be in real stuff, artwork, whatever it is, as long as it's real and can't be printed by a central bank. Or taken from you by a government. If there's a hyperinflation and they just keep, like there's this really famous experiment with mice. What you do with these mice is you put an electrode into their brain, into their septal nuclei, which are the pleasure centers, and then you attach a button to every time they press the button, they get a little stimulation in the pleasure centers, and then you put food just a little bit further away from the button than they can reach with their paws. And they will literally starve to death. They'll just sit there pressing the button, and they can't get the food. But if they go for the food, they have to stop pressing the button. So they constantly ping the button and give themselves pleasure in their heads, and then they starve to death. And the central bankers could be like that. They could just keep pressing Control P on the money printing button and completely destroy the value of money. And then again, who knows where we'll be? It could, we saw in Germany, we saw the rise of Hitler when they tried that in the Weimar Republic. So hyperinflation or hyperdepression, it's one or the other as far as I'm concerned. And then how we get out of that, I hope we return to sound money. What would be an ideal scenario? I think Ron Paul's successor, whoever that is, will hopefully come to the fore in the United States and save the United States. And whoever's similar in the UK or Europe can do the same here. Steve Baker MP is a very, very good MP. He's actually an Austrian MP in the Conservative Party in the UK. He's very, very well thought of in political circles in the UK. I hope he steps to the fore and transforms things, or maybe Nigel Farage. I hope all the politicians come to their senses. I hope the central bankers have their powers taken away, and they're taken away from the printing presses, and we get back to some kind of sound money. I think the key to this is sound money, but however it goes, if you come off heroin after 30 or 40 years since 1971, when the US completely evaporated the gold standard, you're going to have a big hangover. Hopefully the hangover will only be 3 or 4 years long. It won't be 10 or 15 years. But if governments keep intervening, as they are doing, and they keep printing money, we will just not... We're at a party. We've drank a lot of tequilas. We've woken up in the morning, and the central banks just keeps filling the punch bowl. And we just keep sipping from the punch bowl. We never come down from the hangover. And that's where we are now. And at some point, we're either going to pass out unconscious or we're going to sober up. Either way is a grim outlook, and hopefully we have a doctor on hand like Dr. Ron Paul to pick us up and sort us out. But that's why I try to promote the ideas of Austrian economics, because what I want these ideas to be in place so that when the terrible things happen, which I'm predicting, they won't be that terrible because the ideas will be in place to slot home and break up. And again, I think that's why we need secession. We need secession to break up all these monoliths like the EU and the United States, so that, it's very, very hard to have a big military dictatorship in Vermont. I mean, imagine that.
Right.
The military dictatorship of Vermont with General Green, it just doesn't work, does it? I mean, it's ridiculous. But you could have a military dictatorship of the United States or the EU. But you can't really have that for Cornwall or for Belgium or what. It's ridiculous. So secession, again, is another blanket, an immunological blanket to protect us from these politicians and these awful criminals who run political parties.
Yeah, it's been very strange for me because since I'm an Austrian too, I understand how inflated some of these stocks are, but it's kind of nice because I can just buy in, and it's just easy money, even though I understand that it's completely, it's just printed money. But it's difficult for me because I'm trying to still find the right balance of going in and kind of taking the gains where I can, and then putting them in something real, like some sort of commodity, and just staying in and getting more gains.
I think you have to get out at some point. You have to spot when it's about to collapse, because the stock prices will collapse.
Yeah,
maybe 20, 25, 30% when the game's up. They won't collapse as much as bonds. I think bonds are going to be an absolute...
They'll be worthless.
Disaster.
They'll be worthless.
Especially corporate bonds. Because governments will just turn on the printing presses to pay off their own. But then the money will be worthless. So you'll have these bonds. Yes, you'll get your $100 back, but your $100 will buy you a loaf of bread. So it's very, very difficult. I think real things is the key here. I think alternative investments. I think property, gold, silver, oil, real stuff that the government can't steal and the Federal Reserve can't print. I think that's the key to it.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully we can continue this conversation sometime soon.
Yeah, that'd be good fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wake Up Call podcast.
If you would like to listen to more episodes, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes, or subscribe on Stitcher, and check out our website at wakeupcallpodcast.com.
There you will find show notes pages and comment sections dedicated to the show. You can also email us at contact@wakeupcallpodcast.com if you're interested in being interviewed for the show or have any other suggestions.
Thank you.